Still looking at the inauguration yesterday and possibly the president's speech and whether it addressed some of the things that you feel matter to you as a Kenyan. Let's start off with some calls, and I'll take a call first of all from Martin in Homa Bay. Good morning, Martin. Thank you for calling. To your comment or your question, Martin?
Mine is comment.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta got an opportunity. Yesterday, Uhuru got a very good opportunity. Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, President Uhuru got a very good opportunity to face the on the air, but he failed. I was watching what the speech Uhuru was reading. It made me remember when Moi was the president in Kenya.
Okay, I'm losing you. It made you remember?
I used to see people who used to write speech for President Moi, and how Moi was reading the speech. Because the agenda for yesterday... Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm saying the speech for yesterday made me remember how former President Moi used to read his speech on a public place like here. What I'm trying to say is this. Uhuru got an opportunity to talk about dialogue, and he got a very good opportunity to mention Raila's name. And the way it was done, it was very casual. That is why the speech for yesterday never wins anybody. You will get very many calls, not from Martin alone, and you will be told that the problem we have in Kenya, we assume things.
Okay.
We know very well that Dr. Uhuru Kenyatta needs to have a dialogue with Raila Amolo Odinga.
Okay.
And we don't wish that Raila should. We don't really wish that Raila should be sworn in. We know Uhuru has been sworn in. We are not supporting for Raila to be sworn in. But we want Uhuru to be serious, to know that the problem Kenya is having at the moment is that the opposition has 6 million or 7 million, and Uhuru has the rest of the million. So what we need is dialogue.
All right.
This dialogue, it was not mentioned like the way Uhuru mentioned about the school. The way he mentioned about education, I gave him a very big tick. The way he approached the health issue, I gave him a very good tick. But when it comes to issue of dialogue, they mention it in a very casual way.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martin, from Homa Bay. Let's take a call from Victor in Kayole. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning.
Yes, go right ahead, Victor. Okay,
now, first I would like to congratulate the president for being sworn in. Then second, while you are covering Kasarani, hello?
Yes, go right ahead. I can hear you.
While you are covering Kasarani, the media just forgot to do the opposite, because just outside I was watching the president giving his speech. Outside just my house, there was a lot of tear gas, running battles between the police and the NASA supporters, but not doing that. So I don't understand exactly why the media could cover one side and the other, they left it out. I think that is a challenge to you guys. You have to give at least the same coverage of the NASA side and the Jubilee side.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Somehow there you are didn't get the ideas correctly.
All right. Thank you, Victor. Let's take a call from George in Parklands. Good morning, George.
Hello?
Yes, George.
Yes. Now, my question is, now that Uhuru has been sworn in, what is he going to do to this wanton killings of innocent Wananchi?
What is he going to do for?
What is he going to do to the police? In fact, he should tame these policemen from killing innocent Wananchi. That's number one. Number two, the country is more than divided right now. And the people that are surrounding him, can he work by himself instead of working with the psychopaths that are surrounding him, that are giving him wrong ideas about the people?
All right. Thank you for your comments, George. Let's take a call from Elijah in Thika. Good morning, Elijah.
Hello?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, go right ahead. Kindly turn the volume of your television or turn it off completely so that we're able to communicate, Elijah.
First of all, I want to congratulate...
Go ahead, Elijah.
First of all, I want to congratulate the President, Uhuru Kenyatta. And out of what yesterday, in his speech, he has covered everything. He's ready for dialogue with the opposition. So I'm only urging the opposition, maybe what I've seen from that clip that you've shown, that the innocent Wananchi are dying for no reason. So those small speeches that he's making over the streets, I think that you should avoid that kind of. Let him accept that the elections are over, and now we just go ahead, and if he wants, he can come down and try to talk to, be ready to have dialogue with the president.
All right, thank you.
He should just accept the defeat, and that's all.
All right.
We are now, all Kenyans are suffering. The innocent Kenyans are really suffering. Anybody, the young boys, when they have nothing to do. So what happens is that when they see somebody of that dignity coming to talk to them, they will just go there, and they are the ones who are suffering. So I'm asking opposition to accept elections are over. Let him look dialogue, look where the Uhuru is, and they have that dialogue together.
All right,
so
thank you, Elijah. To save on time, let me move on to Edward in Kisumu before we come back to the studio and continue the panel discussion. Now, Edward, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Please turn off the volume of your television, otherwise we'll not be able to communicate effectively.
Good morning.
Morning to you, Edward. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm just... I'm very disappointed.
Okay, why?
Because we are all Kenyans, and the police job is to keep law and order. And I'm disappointed that the police are treating innocent people like foreigners. They are treating Kenyan people like treating an enemy, and I think that is unacceptable. And if Uhuru want to stir this country up, I think he needs to talk to the director of inspector of police and to retrain the police, all policemen, the police department, to retrain them and to show them that whenever they are acting, they should not just go and beat those people. They are beating Kenyan people like animals. And that is unacceptable.
All right, sir.
We need to take this matter very serious.
All right.
And again, to all Kenyans, they are not going to achieve anything if these politicians are going to talk like people like Makomen, people like Dwale. We need to get rid of them. Period. I know it is hard. It's a tough love. Sometimes you have to make a serious decision. They need to talk to people the way they want to be talked to, because we are all citizens of this country and we love this country, and it should be thinking very, very hard. Uhuru should be thinking very, very hard why Magufuli did not attend his inauguration.
All right. Thank you, Edward in Kisumu. And now coming back to studio. Crispus, one of the things that has come up again and again and again, even from the callers, and in this particular electioneering period, is the police brutality. And I think, according to the reports that we have, I mean, very many Kenyans have died, and that is one area that possibly we need to move that conversation forward as the media. What is our responsibility at this point in time? We cannot go and, hunt out the policemen and have them convicted, but we certainly can have our responsibility as media to ensure that this brutality stops.
Thank you, Michael. I think this discussion about police brutality has been long and winding. And sometimes you really ask yourself, what are the facts? Is it really true that police are involved in this brutality that is being talked about? Because the circumstances under which various people have died are quite different, and not actually to justify the number of deaths that we've had. But I think it is important for us as the media now to start looking at things from a different perspective. What really goes through in the mind of a police officer when they're covering riots? Like yesterday, just driving around the city, I think I met quite a number of them. You can tell, even from the look of things, these fellas haven't even taken breakfast. And you know, they are there in their combat gear and they are being provoked by
But does that really give them an excuse to act?
It is not.
Isn't there a code of conduct, a code of engagement, a way that they should operate by the time they pull that trigger? Shouldn't there be threats to life?
Of course there is. And I think, like I started by saying, not to justify the killings that have taken place. But I think it is time for us as a country to start now looking at why police are involved in this kind of thing every other time. What are the circumstances? Michael, you know, every story has got two sides of a story. And I think that is a fact. Number two, listening to the callers that have just called in, there is something around dialogue. I think that is important as a country for us to start having dialogue. But again, you need to ask yourself, dialogue in what sense? What is the content of this dialogue? And again, what is the structure and the format of this dialogue that we are proposing? I've heard President Uhuru Kenyatta, even yesterday in his own speech, and I think the media have actually even covered what he said in terms of reaching out to the opposition. But again, we've had the response from the opposition. I think we need to consider the opposition, first of all, sorry to say this, has to recognize that the electoral process has run its course. There is a head of state who was sworn in yesterday. I think if we start appreciating that, it will take us far much as a country. Then we sit down at a table and say, first, we all have a stake in this country. What are the issues that have divided us as a country for far too long? And I think, Michael, forgive me for saying this, leaders are not the problem in this country. That is a fact. President Uhuru Kenyatta does not fight the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. They have never fought even for a single day. They only fight through the media. But you see, Kenyans take their words literally. And this is why we see Kenyans even taking arms against each other, brutally killing each other. Fellas that we've been living with for quite a long time. I think that has to end. Kenyans must mature. They must sober up and know that all of us have a stake in this country. But
haven't we done our job as a media to inform and educate Kenyans that at the end of the day, this is a political contest, and the reason why passions run so high is not necessarily because of what the leaders are saying, but what they're doing in terms of, let's talk about inclusivity, for example.
Yes.
When we talk about inclusivity, our leaders, our political leaders, sometimes want to make us feel that inclusivity is having somebody from your community having a post, whereas really that is not inclusivity. Have we done a good job of ensuring Kenyans are aware inclusivity has nothing to do or little to do with your person being at the top?
I think I would say yes and no. Because some of this conversation that we are having as a country is partly fueled by the media. But the media, right now, I think you need to change the narrative. You need to change the narrative in the sense that you are taking the lead role in terms of shaping the narrative that has become the country of Kenya. Pick out positive stories. Black out hate mongers. Black out some of these ugly incidents that we keep on seeing. You know, there is no point of you covering a politician who is spewing hate. At what expense? You know, we must ask ourselves. Let me tell you, Michael, this country has danced with fire for far too long. It is only fortunate that even yesterday we know what has been happening. We've seen even from January, nobody was thinking that we were going to come this far as a country. Looking at the happenings around the political scene, you know, it was so unfortunate. But I'll say this, you know, former president of the US said, in politics, nothing happens by mistake. If it does, you can bet it was bound to happen that way. Kenyans must know that politicians are doing their part. Let us Kenyans do our part.
Do our part.
The media,
right.
The media right now, you need to pick out stories that speak to our needs. For instance, in yesterday's speech by the head of state, when we talk about health, when we talk about corruption, when we talk about agriculture, Benjamin Netanyahu was in the country yesterday. What are the discussions that he and his host, President Uhuru Kenyatta, had around agriculture? We know Israel is a very robust country and a very significant country when it comes to agriculture. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu was in the country, I think, even last year? Or the year
he
before.
was. And there were quite a number of discussions regarding agriculture.
A number of conversations went around agriculture. A number of conversations went around security. As the media, have we been able to flesh out these discussions and put out the solutions out there?
And again, maybe looking at the importance of somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu coming for this kind of swearing-in ceremony, what does that say about the legitimacy of the president? But again, on the same breath, have we weighed out, or should we weigh out, for instance, the president of Nigeria not attending, one of the biggest economies in Africa? Does that speak to something about Kenya and the electoral process that we had?
I wouldn't actually like to read so much in the failure by the president of Nigeria not attending. Because if you've been following, we know what has been happening around his health. So I would actually, as a person, I wouldn't like to read so much in that. But there is a concern as far as Pombe Magufuli did not attend. We know that Kenya and Tanzania have had some kind of frosty relationship for some time now. I think as a country and Tanzania itself, we must sit down and find out exactly what is ailing the two countries. Because we cannot afford to continue running a country and assuming that everything around us in Tanzania is okay. We saw Pombe Magufuli detaining our livestock and auctioning them at some point. We saw the government of Tanzania banning chicks from the country. Really, is that the way to go as a country? I think the entire East African region, the leadership of the East African region, and I think President Uhuru Kenyatta has set the tone in his speech yesterday. He wants to emerge as a Pan-Africanist.
Okay.
Can it be emulated by Pombe Magufuli?
Well, there seems to be a frosty relationship already between John Pombe Magufuli and Uhuru, given that there has been that Cold War. But as we now get to a point where we want to wind up, follow-up. Media has been accused greatly of not following up on certain things. We do know that Jubilee, one, has a manifesto, and two, even from the president's speech yesterday, we are able to glean a few promises and a few things that he set the pace or was seeming to be setting the pace for the next 5 years. What are some of those things that we need to pick out? And number two, what follow-up should we have?
First of all, I think other than just going the natural way and having reactions to his speech, I think you need to analyze the speech correctly and pin down the processes through which he intends to implement some of the things that he's mentioned and put the government to task. Always remind them, you said this. I think for Uhuru Kenyatta, it is going to be a very tight and a very heavy 5-year term because, you know, this is his final term. He wants to leave a legacy. But what kind of legacy does he want to leave as a president? I think that is a conversation he may want to have with his inner core team. Number two, we would like to see going forward the kind of people that he will bring into his government, because the kind of minds and skill that he will bring into his government will inform his strategy. Number two, it will inform the kind of legacy he may want to leave. So we know there are serious concerns around part of his cabinet, over the first 5 years. I think as the media, and I think a number of names, I've seen a number of names being thrown here and there. As the media, how do you intend to interrogate some of these people that will be brought on board? Number two, we know that Parliament will be vetting some of these fellas that will be proposed. Will it just be a normal process like we've seen before? Go in, go out, be confirmed. As the media, I think you need to stand up and question some of the characters that might be brought on board.
All right. Any difference that we should expect, possibly given that Jubilee already had a 5-year term, which many, especially in the area of corruption, feel they did not want to address it, as it were? There are those who say that institutions and the laws we have, but the goodwill from the government was lacking. Is that something that possibly you think could have a follow-up? And Uhuru Kenyatta now having his last term, constitutionally speaking, it could go two ways. He can either, he has nothing to lose or has everything to lose. Your view?
You can't say that President Uhuru Kenyatta has got nothing to lose in the next 5 years. Actually, he's got everything to lose. If, first of all, he doesn't leave a solid legacy as the president. No leader would like to do that. Number two, if he doesn't address some of the concerns that are being raised around his government. You mentioned about corruption. I've said it time and again that as a country, we must be able to ask ourselves, do we really need to institutionalize? It's becoming a difficult word. The fight and make it a career for certain people. The fight against corruption.
And there are countries that actually have institutionalized corruption or have given it a term that now you're able to work but within controllable measures.
I think we need to borrow best practices from across the world because we've seen EACC ever since its formation. We haven't seen critical achievables that can be associated with EACC. We need to ask ourselves, where have we gone wrong? Is it about the leadership or is it about the institution? Is it about the culture of Kenyans that we condone corruption everywhere we sit? You know, that is a long conversation, Michael, that as a country, if we are meant actually to achieve what we want to achieve as a country, we must be able to be honest with ourselves. If we are not doing that, then we better forget.
All right, your closing comments as we wind up Newsroom today, especially on follow-up and what we should expect in the next few months, given the kind of period that we have had before the election. But as per the president's declaration yesterday, election period is over.
I would actually agree with him that the election period is over. But again, it depends with where you sit. You know, as a country, we cannot continue politicking election after election. Even right now, we are still politicking. At what point do we sit down as a country and say that we now want to address the things that matter, the things that address how to put food on the table? Number two, as the media, like I've said before, it is upon you guys to chart the way forward, not to run after every other person's agenda. You know, it depends with the people that KTN is speaking to. It depends with the people the Standard is speaking to. It depends with the people Daily Nation and other media platforms are speaking to. So identify the stories that speak to your relevant audience, but again, take the story forward by saying this is how to drive the conversation. Not actually running after press conference every time, not telling people that we now want to address security, but that security is being addressed from a politician's point of view,
as opposed to the way it's supposed to be. Let me just finish off, as we finish off, wind up with a few calls. Let me take a call from Joseph in Embakasi. Good morning, Joseph.
Yes, good morning.
Yes, go right ahead.
My comment, the Uhuru speech yesterday was terrible. I mean, he's a politician and he has a country that's falling apart, and he should have poured to the entire country in an attempt to unite them. But I think the problem that we have is that the institutions that are supposed to keep a country like Kenya together have miserably failed, and the media is on top of my list. I mean, we cannot have two people screaming about the Constitution of Kenya, and yet the freedom of assembly is not even allowed. We cannot have people screaming about the Constitution of Kenya when Baby Pendo is killed in our house, when the little boy is shot. And where is the Constitution for these Kenyans? And then I think the clergy, which is the other institution, they are asleep. It's like they are not doing their part. So now the citizens feel like they need to take over and form their constitutional assembly to drive the agenda. I mean it's a terrible failure on the institutions that should keep a country like Kenya together.
All right, thank you, Joseph from Embakasi. Let's take our last call. Jacob in Kilifi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, this is Fikrin Jacob from Kilifi.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think my brother Mike, it's good to face the reality as it ought to be, as it is. Yeah, because we have to accept that there is a problem in the first place. And this problem affects all of us, be it, in the Jubilee or in NASA. And that's the single thing that's where we miss the mark from the beginning. Because it happens like NASA believes that there is a problem, but Jubilee does not want to believe that there is a problem. I think going forward, Micah, as a youth, with all humble submission, I think we are already in the niche. It's important, if not so prudent, to stop digging further. We have a problem in Kenya that we ought to accept that there is a problem. And instead of coming to the table, the Jubilee divide is, adding insult to injury, but making sure that they perpetrate it further through the police force. Thus, I'm telling you this, violence will not solve our problems as a republic, because insofar it could solve a problem, but in the same manner, it introduces a seed for the next problem that ought to sprout. Think about the family that is losing, the family that are losing their loved ones. What are they likely to do even in future?
Okay.
Because they still have that anger, And I think, Micah, an advice to the president, when you seal a boiling pot with a lid, everything will seem temporarily to be quiet. But so long as that pot is still, on heat, it will explode violently. And
all right.
That's where the country is likely to move to.
All right, thank you, Jacob. And, because of time, that's where we're going to have to wind up Newsroom. Chris Pasiankem, thank you for joining us this morning. The other two guests that we had invited did not make it. And, that's where we wind up this segment of the show, which is the Newsroom. But do stay with us. We're going to take a short break, but when we come